So, could Po survive it? Let me break down exactly what we're working with on both sides. First, we need to power scale Po properly, because the answer to this question depends entirely on which version of Po we're talking about, and most people get this wrong by treating him as a single character when he's actually gone through 4 films and multiple TV series worth of development that make him almost unrecognizable from who he was at the start. Film 1 Po is the baseline. He's a complete novice who learned enough kung fu in roughly a week to defeat Tai Lung, who had 20 years of dedicated training and had already beaten 5 elite masters. The mechanism for that win is specific and documented. Po's panda physiology is naturally resistant to pressure point attacks because his nerve endings are too deep under the fat for standard techniques to reach them. Tai Lung's entire arsenal relied on nerve strikes. They did nothing to Po except tickle him. That's a biological counter that Po didn't train for and didn't earn. Take that counter out of the equation and Film 1 Po loses to Tai Lung, probably quickly. But Film 2 Po is a different situation. By Kung Fu Panda 2, Po has trained seriously, fights alongside the Furious 5 at a level that earns their genuine respect, and develops inner peace, which the film describes as a state of supreme precision that allows him to do things like catch cannonballs fired at point-blank range and redirect them with exact control. He tanked a direct hit from Shen's largest cannon and survived. He lifted and redirected the force of multiple incoming cannonballs simultaneously. His pain tolerance by this point is documented as essentially extreme, capable of withstanding impacts that would destroy most characters in his universe. Film 3 Po, and especially his Chi Mastery form, is operating in a completely different tier. His Chi is described as more potent than every Kung Fu master in China combined. He defeated Kai, who had absorbed the Chi of every master alive. In that form, Po is arguably the most powerful being in his universe, apart from Oogway himself. So the honest question isn't, could Po survive Bruce Lee? It's which Po? Now let's power scale Bruce Lee, because this is where most people either wildly overestimate or wildly underestimate him, depending on which side of the internet they fell into. Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch traveled at 118 miles per hour and could knock a 200-pound man back 16 feet, generating force equivalent to 350 pounds of pressure, which is the same force Muhammad Ali punched with, despite Ali outweighing Lee by 130 pounds. His kick speed reached 86 miles per hour, and he could deliver 6 kicks per second. His reaction time was documented at 0.05 of a second, fast enough to perform the coin replacement trick multiple witnesses verified. During filming, Bruce Lee's speed had an assistant director's entire body swaying back and forth in reaction to blows too fast for his brain to register, and he often had to slow his movements down on set so his fellow actors could react believably. His Jeet Kune Do philosophy is what makes him particularly dangerous in a real fight context. Jeet Kune Do features non-telegraphic striking principles borrowed from fencing, meaning Lee could initiate a strike without any forewarning through shoulder tension, foot movement, or body shift. His opponent would have no time to react because the signal that a strike was coming arrived at the same moment the strike did. Against a conventional fighter, this is essentially undefendable. You cannot block something you cannot predict, and Lee trained specifically to remove every tell from his striking. His 2-finger push-ups, his documented ability to throw rice into the air and catch it with chopsticks, his 200 push-ups without pause, these aren't impressive party tricks. They represent a level of neuromuscular control and physical conditioning that places him at the extreme upper boundary of what human physiology can produce. He wasn't strong by bodybuilder standards, but he was extraordinarily strong relative to his mass, and his speed and precision were documented by multiple credible witnesses in controlled settings, not just on film sets where enhancement was possible. Here is the honest assessment of what Bruce Lee represents in combat terms. He is the peak of what a trained human being with exceptional natural gifts and 2 decades of obsessive, dedicated practice can produce. His ceiling is human. It is a very high human ceiling, but it is still human. So what actually happens when these two fight? And does it matter which Po version we're using? Start with Film 1 Po, the week of training version. This is actually the most interesting matchup, because the outcome isn't what most people would predict. Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do relies fundamentally on reading an opponent's telegraphs and exploiting their reaction time gaps. The problem is that Po in Film 1 isn't a trained fighter with learnable tells. He's a chaotic improviser whose movement patterns are genuinely unpredictable because they're not based on any trained system. Lee's ability to anticipate and counter comes from his understanding of how trained fighters move. An untrained 250-pound panda flopping around using cooking pans and improvised dumplings as fighting elements doesn't fit any template in Lee's mental database. That said, Lee's non-telegraphic striking would still land. Po's reaction time in Film 1 is not exceptional. He gets hit repeatedly by Tai Lung and only survives because his physiology absorbs the damage. Lee's strikes won't nerve strike Po to paralysis. His nerve endings are too deep for that. But 350 pounds of force concentrated into a precise strike to Po's throat, temple, or knee would produce real damage, even accounting for Po's natural durability. Lee doesn't need to hit nerve points to hurt someone. He just needs to hit them hard and fast in vulnerable places, and he knows exactly where those are. The coin replacement speed is relevant here specifically because it tells you something about what film one Po's reaction window actually is. If Lee can replace a coin in a closing fist before the fist can close, he can put a strike into any gap in Po's guard before Po's nervous system registers that the guard needs to close. Film 1 Po's improvised, untrained movement style would create dozens of those gaps per second. Lee would find them all. The honest answer for Film 1 Po versus peak Bruce Lee is that Po probably loses, but it takes longer than it should because nothing in Lee's training prepared him for an opponent who physically cannot be paralyzed and who uses his mass and food-based improvisation as genuine combat tools. It would be a strange fight. Lee would win it, but he would win it confused. Film 2 Po with Inner Peace is a completely different calculation. Inner Peace in the Kung Fu Panda universe is described as supreme precision. The ability to guide a single raindrop to the ground without dispersing it, to catch cannonballs and return them with exact control. What that means in combat terms is that Po, at this level, can read and redirect incoming force with a precision that borders on precognitive. He doesn't need to predict Lee's strikes. He can feel the force coming and redirect it at the moment of contact. The specific mechanics of this matter when analyzing it against Lee. Lee's 1-inch punch works because the force generates at the moment of contact, concentrated into a tiny point. That concentration is what sends people flying. But Inner Peace, demonstrated through the cannonball catches, gives Po the ability to receive concentrated force and redirect it, rather than absorb it. He caught projectiles moving at the speed cannonballs travel, and sent them back on calculated trajectories. A human punch, however fast, is moving slower than a cannonball, and carries less kinetic energy. If Po can receive and redirect a cannonball, he can receive and redirect Lee's 1-inch punch. The technique that is Lee's most devastating signature move becomes something Po can use against him. And here's where it gets further complicated. Lee's fighting philosophy is built on the idea of meeting force with minimal counter force applied at the precise right moment. That's actually closer to what Inner Peace enables than anything in conventional martial arts. The difference is that Lee is applying this principle at human speed and human scale. Po is applying it at the scale of someone who catches artillery fire. They're philosophically aligned, but operating in completely different capability tiers. Film 2 Po's durability also changes the equation fundamentally. He tanked Shen's largest cannon at close range. Bruce Lee at his absolute physical peak generates 350 pounds of force per punch. The cannon Po absorbed would have generated several orders of magnitude more force than that. Lee cannot hit Po hard enough to matter against a target that durable once Po has reached that version of himself. There's one more variable worth factoring in that most analyses of this matchup would overlook. Po's body fat isn't just a durability mechanism, it's an energy redirector. The same physiology that makes him immune to nerve strikes also means that blunt force hitting him doesn't land cleanly. It disperses through the fat layer before concentrating on any specific structure. Lee's precision is extraordinary, but precision requires a target that responds predictably to concentrated force. Po's body absorbs and disperses force in ways that would make Lee's most precise techniques feel like hitting a mattress rather than a human opponent. The feedback Lee would receive from striking Po would be wrong, in ways that disrupt the real-time adjustment that makes his fighting so effective. The answer for Film 2 Po versus Bruce Lee is that Bruce Lee cannot win, not because Po is more skilled, he isn't. Bruce Lee's technique in a conventional matchup is superior in almost every dimension, but Po's physiology combined with Inner Peace creates a set of defensive capabilities that exist outside the parameters Lee's fighting philosophy was designed to address. Here's the part worth sitting with, because it changes how you think about both of these characters. Bruce Lee was a philosopher of combat, not just a practitioner. His whole approach was built on the idea that the best fighter is the one who adapts fastest, who has no fixed style and therefore no exploitable pattern. Be Like Water wasn't a motivational poster, it was a strategic doctrine. He specifically designed Jeet Kune Do to defeat classical stylists by using their own predictable patterns against them. The whole system is built around one insight. If you have no fixed form, your opponent cannot prepare for you. And if you can read your opponent's fixed form, you can exploit it before they realize they've been read. Po is the character who broke every classical style by being too weird and too durable to fit into any of them. Tai Lung's classical nerve strike style failed completely against Po's physiology. Shen's overwhelming firepower failed against Po's inner peace. The chameleon's magical cage failed because Po's chi exceeded what she calculated as possible. Every fighter who engaged Po through their established system lost because Po exists outside established systems, not because he trained harder than them, but because the universe keeps producing situations his established opponents cannot process. What that means is that Film 2 Po versus Bruce Lee is actually the one matchup where Lee's be like water philosophy meets its genuine test, an opponent who also cannot be categorized by a fixed system, who adapts the incoming force rather than resisting it, and who represents a fundamentally different kind of combat intelligence than Lee's system was built to engage. Lee trained to defeat fighters. Po accidentally defeats fighting philosophies. Bruce Lee was the ceiling of what a human being can be in a fight. Po, by Film 2, is no longer operating at human scale. And that's the only honest answer to this question. Film 1 Po, Lee wins. It's close and genuinely confusing for him, but Lee wins. And he wins it faster once he realizes the nerve strikes aren't working and adjusts to pure impact targeting. Film 2 Po with inner peace. It's not close. Po wins. And the reason is that inner peace combined with Panda physiology creates a defensive system that simply has no answer in Lee's toolkit. He cannot strike fast enough to bypass the redirection. He cannot hit hard enough to matter through the durability. And he cannot read an opponent whose movement patterns emerge from food-based improvisation and a body shape no fighting system was ever designed around. Bruce Lee, if he were the kind of person he appeared to be in interviews, would probably find that genuinely interesting, rather than frustrating. His entire philosophy was about encountering what your training couldn't prepare you for, and adapting in real time. A 250-pound panda catching your 1-inch punch and redirecting it with a smile would have been exactly the kind of problem he wanted to encounter. Not because it would have changed the outcome, because it would have taught him something no human opponent ever could. That's the thing about both of these characters. They were never really about beating opponents. They were about understanding what they were capable of, and whether that capability had a limit, which is a different pursuit entirely from winning. One of them was real, and the other was animated, and both of them spent their whole lives chasing that question harder than almost anyone else in their respective worlds ever did.